where police overnight released a person who had been detained for questioning in the abduction of Nancy Guthrie. This comes after the FBI released videos of a person at the home on the night she was taken. Also ahead, we'll dig into a grand jury refusing to indict 6 congressional Democrats who posted a video back in November reminding active duty military members they are obligated to refuse illegal orders. Plus, it will be another busy day on Capitol Hill. Attorney General Pam Bondi is set to testify before the House Judiciary Committee on the Justice Department's handling of the Epstein Files. Meanwhile, yesterday on the Hill, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick admitted that he had more contact with Epstein than he had previously acknowledged publicly. We'll play for you his explanation on that. And we'll go through yesterday's contentious hearing with Trump administration immigration officials who were grilled about ICE operations and deadly shootings of Alex Preddy and Renee Good, as it appears nothing has changed in Minneapolis. A lot of reports out of the area say that even though there's been a drawdown and changes announced, that they are living very much just as fearful and horrified as they were before. Along with Willie and me, we have the co-host of our 9 a.m. hour, staff writer at The Atlantic, Jonathan Lemire, and co-host of the Rest is Politics podcast, the BBC's Caddy K. So, Willie, of course, our top story this morning about Nancy Guthrie.
Yeah, the video came out yesterday, a flurry of activity last night. As of now, the urgent search for the mother of Today Show co-host Savannah Guthrie, Nancy Guthrie, continues this morning, more than 10 days after the 84-year-old's apparent abduction from her home in Arizona. Early this morning, authorities released a person they had taken in for questioning in the investigation into Nancy's disappearance. Police say the person had been detained during a traffic stop in Rio Rico, Arizona, about an hour's drive south of Tucson near the Mexican border. The FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Department also carried out a court-authorized search nearby, but that search since has concluded, and the man in question there has been released. According to the New York Times, he said he had not heard of Nancy Guthrie, but hopes she is found safe, adding, quote, "I hope they get the suspect because I am not it." This comes just hours after authorities put out a series of chilling surveillance photos and videos yesterday showing what they say is an armed individual appearing to have tampered with the camera at Nancy Guthrie's front door the morning of her disappearance. The person seen here standing on the porch wearing a full ski mask, heavy gloves, a backpack, and a jacket zipped up to the neck. These new images released by the FBI sparking an uptick in calls to law enforcement, and yes, some hope from the family. Savannah posting on social media, "Someone out there recognizes this person. We believe she is still out there. Bring her home," talking about her mother, Nancy. Joining us now live from Rio Rico, MS Now investigative reporter Mark Santia. Mark, good morning. What is the latest on the ground there about this person of interest who was pulled over during a traffic stop and since has been released?
Good morning, Willie. The Pima County Sheriff's Department sent us a statement saying investigators have completed their search of a property here in Rio Rico, Arizona. That property, Willie, is a house just down the street from where we're standing. Police also saying the Nancy Guthrie investigation is ongoing. They had no further details at this time. Now, as you mentioned, police had earlier said they detained a person during a traffic stop, and he was being questioned in the Nancy Guthrie investigation. That was earlier this morning. Now, we spoke to the man who says he was the one who police had detained and questioned in connection to the Nancy Guthrie investigation. The man told us he was released by police. He is back home this morning. The man also said he had nothing to do with Nancy's disappearance. He said he was shaken by the events that unfolded late last night. Again, police saying they have no further details at this time. They did not comment on the person who was detained. What appeared to be a major development in the case has now taken a turn. Investigators are no longer, you see behind me, they are no longer here at this scene. They have opened up the street leading into this neighborhood. Again, investigators have left the area. We're about 15 minutes from the Mexican border, about an hour south of Tucson, where Nancy lives. This is still, we are being told, this is still a very active investigation. The big question at this hour, where is Nancy? How is she? We do not have answers at this hour. But again, we're being told this investigation is continuing. Willie?
So, Mark, last night there was kind of this flurry of activity, talk that SWAT trucks had been deployed, the bomb squad truck had been deployed. We saw those trucks leaving the parking lot. Do we have any sense for what that was? Was that tied to this traffic stop in Rio Rico?
Yeah, at this time, Willie, it does not appear that that movement was tied to this investigation. At this time, it does not appear the SWAT trucks, the other vehicles up in Tucson were related. We knew and we were told there was a heavy FBI presence here in Rio Rico. We left and came right here last night. As we arrived, we were told a person was detained. We came to this area. Willie, we could not drive down the street. It was being held here by the Sheriff's Department. They had the street blocked. The neighborhood was locked down as investigators began their search. They had a court order. They had that warrant. They entered the home. They did their search. We weren't able to go down there. It was this whole area was being held. A very different scene now. They've left, but that's where we're at. It was a flurry, as you said, Willie, a flurry of activity last night. This would appear to be a major development in the case. Again, taking an unexpected turn for many investigators who thought they definitely had something going. They thought they were definitely on a sort of that road, a path. Again, a major development took a turn. We've seen this before, though, Willie, in the case of the shooting at Brown University. They had a person of interest in custody. That person was released. So investigations are very, very fluid. And again, the person who was detained, that person we spoke with, he says he was released. He is back home this morning. Willie. And
it may not be him, but that video does provide so much for people to go on. Could be someone else today. MS Now investigative reporter Mark Santia live from Rio Rico, Arizona. Thank you, Mark. Joining us now, retired FBI Special Agent Rob D'Amico. He was a member of the FBI's hostage rescue team, now an MS Now National Security and Intelligence Analyst. Rob, thanks for being with us again this morning. So the video was huge yesterday. The fact that we were able to see a person, we'll see their gait, their clothing, get a look into his eyes and perhaps some facial hair and all those things. And then quickly thereafter, we heard about people of interest. We heard about SWAT trucks being deployed. Putting together everything you saw yesterday, where do you think this investigation is?
Well, I think the detention of someone last night, I think it was probably led by a call-in. It all depends, because it was in a vehicle, which is kind of odd for this. So it was either someone called it in, like it appears to be so-and-so. FBI started going down there. Maybe they had the locals watching a location, and then that person got in their vehicle. And being 15 miles from the Mexican border, they chose to actually do a traffic stop and detain them and question them. Or it was something in a traffic stop that the police officer saw that caused this. Don't know exactly which of those two cases it is, but it's probably like that. They're going to get more calls. When you put out video like that and you put out pictures, especially because they're not definitive. There's the mask on and other things. So the jacket, the gait, the slight picture of his lips and possibly a mustache. People are going to say, oh, that looks like so-and-so. The calls are going to come in. And now police have to deal with all those calls, trying to put them in priority of order on which one has the most connection that they think. They're going to follow all the leads, but you only have so many resources. So that's going to start happening now. They knew as soon as they put that video out, that's where it was going to go.
Rob, does this video rule out anything? Is it possible that this individual was acting alone, or that this was happening at every entrance with several people? Is there any indication a vehicle was involved nearby, outside the house? Is there any piece of this puzzle that can be put together beyond what we see in this video?
I think they're talking to neighbors to see if they have any incidences of something like this happening, or this person being caught on their camera going up to their door. They're looking to see. I don't think it's that random. I find it hard to believe that this, a random something like this led to kidnapping. One, because she has medical conditions where it's not easy for her to walk. So I think there had to be a vehicle. I think there had to be more than one person to deal with even an elderly woman being taken. You saw the blood there that was verified in hers. Life survival is not, is pretty strong. For one person to then have to move that person, and how did they get her out of there? I think there's more involved. But I do think it showed he wasn't as well prepared as I thought maybe. if he was well prepared, he would have brought things to deal with that camera, especially if he did a good reconnaissance. And you have to kind of assume people have Ring cameras or Nest doorbell cams. So the fact that he's trying to look for vegetation to cover up that, to me, was like, well, he wasn't as prepared as I thought. So I think they're going through all of that, and they're looking at it. There's a lot of questions why it took so long. And I think that they ended up using some bleeding edge technology that they never used before in order to get this. Because I heard they got the video just yesterday morning. They showed it to the family. The family didn't recognize anyone. You do want to show it to them first. If they recognize someone, then you don't have to release it to the public, so to speak. But when the family didn't recognize it, they came out to the public immediately. I don't think it was, I think probably Google did a lot of help with their engineers, probably working with the FBI, trying to get this, something they hadn't done before. Google, the companies are somewhat, they've started doing, subpoenas and warrants for things. But the chief security officer for Google, I know he's a former hostage rescue team member, former SEAL. And then someone, like this, where they're looking for a person, they're going to throw everything they have at it.
Yeah, Rob, you're certainly right. Working with Google engineers on the back end to get the video out of the cloud, that's why it took more than a week or so. My question to you remains just sort of about the communication or lack thereof or unclear communication from the kidnappers. At times, the family seems to be responding as if they think these notes that have gone to media outlets are credible. Other times, less so. They're still asking for proof that these are the actual kidnappers. Law enforcement yet to confirm one way or the other. What's your read here about the sort of mixed signals and perhaps silence from those who have Nancy Guthrie?
Well, I think it's part of the fact that the kidnappers haven't given a line of communication. Normally, you get a line of communication. Overseas kidnappings, it gets very tough, especially with terrorist groups, because getting to that terrorist group, a lot of times you have to use third party like the Qataris and such to get to the right person. You have a lot of people coming as opportunists to say that they have control. In U.S. kidnappings, that's not usually the same. But because there's no communication pathway, the Guthries, I think, have to, one, if they provided information in these notes that were, like we heard about the location of the watch, and they did provide things that were at the crime scene, gave it some validity that they are in fact part of this kidnapping. So they have to deal with it. They have to talk to them, as we saw. I think it was the third video where they said they'd pay those. That one always struck me as odd. It was like they weren't her words. They weren't natural. They probably worked with the crisis negotiators, working with them. They wanted to say certain things. They wanted to be concise, but they're also reaching out because they haven't got anything back from them in response to it. So they went out with the last video, one, thanking the community. Those were her words naturally coming out, thanking people and talking about this. And if you see anything to help. So I think it's a parallel type of investigation. As this all goes on, everyone's working overnight, 24/7. I think last night, even the resources that were to talk to the Dane person, they didn't stop on any other of the leads that they're working. They were going all out, because I'm used to, anyone who works kidnappings are used to the ups and downs. As we say, it's like, watching you make sausage. These aren't good times, and you have lots of ups and downs. And now with the media, the whole public is brought into those unfortunately, those cases.
Rob, we're now 11 days into this. Obviously, the family is exhausted. The investigators must be exhausted, thinking of those ups and downs. In your experience, when a case goes on for so long like this, with really no leads and no communication from the kidnappers, does something change after a certain period of time? As we head into the further we get from the incident itself, does the investigation take on a different quality? Are they looking for different things?
Yes, they do. Though they have so many resources, the FBI has so many resources that you can keep going down one lane, and then you can have people looking at things that are way outside of the box, so to speak, things that may not come up, and they may be looking at different things. Again, that's where all the resources come in. It is the hardest, obviously, on the family and the negotiators that are with the family, because I've seen in overseas ones last years, where the ups and downs are just tremendous when you think you have a ray of hope. I think yesterday, for the family to see this video was very difficult. Before everything was conceptualized as you're thinking of what happened, to see someone coming up to your mother's door with a gun and doing these things brought it to reality of what actually probably happened. And I think it was very intense for them to see this video. They had to see it. And then to hear someone was detained. Again, that they go up hoping it's some part of the investigation that can lead to her location, and then it comes crashing down when he gets released. Those are just traumatic events that I have been around people with that, and it's just really tough to deal with. And then as it goes long term, it really gets drawn out, and the family's emotions and responses, they have to take care of themselves. That's one thing that the crisis negotiators do. They make sure the family is doing things, eating and sleeping and trying to sleep because they know it's going to be a long process.
Rob, you touched on this a moment ago, but seeing the video, I think there was all this speculation over the last week and a half about what kind of kidnappers this could be. Could it be a group? How professional was it? And then watching that video, the kind of bumbling effort by a guy who didn't think to cover the camera with duct tape, who grabbed, vegetation from the garden to cover it, who was kind of staggering in and out. What does just this even brief bit of video tell you about what kind of operation the FBI and law enforcement might be dealing with?
That's exactly what I saw. I've always said I actually want this to be an organized group that is very professional, because organized groups that do this have access to doctors and medicine that they can get to Nancy Guthrie to take care of her, to ensure that she is okay, because in their eyes, she's a currency. When I saw this video, that's not what I saw. And unfortunately, it's one of those things. But people like that make more mistakes. And that's where I think the investigators are looking at, well, if he didn't prepare for a camera, what else did he do? Did he bring a phone into the house? Did he do something, again, that we can find out what he's did? I think his gait on the video, I think the jacket is going to be key. I think they're now going out to surrounding areas, and they're going to find a camera that maybe has that jacket without the mask on.
Retired FBI Special Agent Rob D'Amico, thank you very much for your continued insights on this story. Just so important to us. Thank you. And still ahead on 23 past the hour, a federal grand jury has declined to indict Senators Mark Kelly, Alyssa Slotkin, and 4 other Democratic lawmakers over a video they made last fall reminding service members of their duty to refuse illegal orders. This marks the latest rebuke of the Trump administration's push to prosecute the president's perceived political foes. The video featured 6 Democratic lawmakers, all military or intelligence veterans, warning service members about unlawful orders. President Trump has called the message seditious and said their actions could be punishable by death. Joining us now, opinion columnist for the New York Times, David French, and investigative reporter for the New York Times, Michael Schmidt. Michael, just first of all, anything more you can add to this? Yet another setback where they try and bring something against folks that they feel have disobeyed or not been loyal to the president, and then the courts say, what are you doing?
We've got a pattern here. This is now the 3rd instance in which the Justice Department, at the urging of the President of the United States, has gone to try and bring criminal charges and failed, and in dramatic fashion. What I wonder is whether this is sort of the Justice Department's way of trying to deal with Trump, in the sense of like, okay, you want us to go do this, we're going to go ahead and do this, and now you don't have to blame us, you can blame this grand jury. Look, you had the Comey case, where they struggled initially to get the indictment. They got it on one of the charges, but they struggled on the other. The James case, which they went repeatedly to the grand jury and failed to get an indictment on. And then you now have this. And to me, the significance of it is this, is that if Donald Trump cannot invent and make up criminality about the people he doesn't like, that is a major check on his power. I realize that that's a very unusual statement to make. This is something that we've never really confronted, certainly in recent American history. But if Trump cannot create criminality, that's a significant thing. And we're seeing the buds of that in what appears to be a pushback from the judicial branch.
So, Michael, this is out of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, led by Jeanine Pirro, obviously a longtime close ally of President Trump, thinking she's doing him a favor. But as you lay out, again, this only hurts him when they can't even get an indictment to begin with. I'm curious, did Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary's repeated messages from 2016 where he said exactly the same thing, that you should and must defy illegal orders, did that come up at all, or did they not even get that far?
We don't know what came up in the grand jury room, but if you look, there was some statistic I saw last night that there was something like, these are called no true bills, when a grand jury comes back and says, we're not going to bring this case. There's this old saying, you could indict a ham sandwich, something that we thought was true and is apparently not. In one of the years, several years ago, there were 6 no true bills in like the entire Justice Department in a year. We have seen many more than that, whether it was with the sandwich, the person who threw the sandwich, or the Jameson case that I was talking about and such. So the number of them is larger, and there's something going on. Another thing that we've never seen before, where grand jurors, people that are picked for jury duty, that are on grand juries, are doing highly unusual different things. Are they doing that because they don't think the evidence is there? Are they doing that because they don't trust what the Justice Department is saying? Do they do that because they think they're doing it at the behest of the president? There's a larger factor at play here that we don't have full visibility into, because what goes on inside a grand jury room is secret. But in terms of trying to understand it, there's something going on at the level of the average citizen that they are either not taking the Justice Department seriously, or the Justice Department is not bringing enough convincing evidence. And just last thing on this, the whole thing Trump says about the cases against him is that they were, cooked up, and, this is a plot and a hoax, and, whatever he calls it. At the end of the day, all of those cases obviously made it past grand juries, and they made it past judges. And some of them went to trial, and in one of them, he received a conviction. So if you think about the sort of counterfactual of what happened to Trump and what's happening here, in the minds of some, does it increase the validity of what Trump faced? So,
David, certainly these grand juries are providing a bit of a check on President Trump's power and his retribution campaign. But there has been, this is still a painful process potentially for people involved. These lawmakers here, we talked about, as Michael just mentioned, FBI Director Comey, Letitia James. We currently right now, Don Lemon and other journalists are, still facing charges for doing their jobs in Minnesota. So that's even if they can't have convictions, this is still an onerous process and an abuse of power.
Well, there's an old saying that the process is the punishment. That what you go through if you're a target of a federal investigation, nobody wants to endure that. Nobody wants to. And Mike's point is very well taken. When you look at the way grand juries are actually beginning to function according to their constitutional role, which is to be a check. A grand jury is supposed to be a check. It's not very much of one. I mean, it's been generous to even call it a speed bump over the last many years. But now you're seeing when somebody does begin to encroach well beyond the bounds of their power, this check is rising up. But if we're counting on grand juries to save our republic,
right,
that's a big problem. This is impeachable stuff here. I mean, and just to put the extremism of this attempted prosecution in context, what's next? Is he going to prosecute the authors of the Department of Defense Law of War Manual, which includes the precise circumstances which service members must refuse to follow orders, and includes, as an example, shooting shipwrecked survivors?
Right.
That's an example in the Law of War Manual. So are we prosecuting those people? I hope the statute of limitations has run out on me. When I was a JAG officer in Iraq advising an armored cavalry squadron, I went through the circumstances in which law orders are unlawful and must be disobeyed. This is basic stuff here.
Right.
And you're trying to indict somebody for this? I just fear that a lot of these stories, and this is an incredible scoop, a lot of these stories are just getting lost in the wave of every other story that comes next.
There's so much happening, and that's, I think, part of the strategy, some might argue. You mentioned impeachable stuff. You would need some Republicans to go with that, and that's doubtful.
Right.
Or a successful midterm for the Democrats, Caddy K, so that perhaps they have more power to act. Caddy.
Yeah, I mean, clearly that is one of the things that President Trump is worried about in the midterms, and we see him already sowing the seeds of kind of disinformation around the midterms, saying that they're going to be rigged, and with the visit down to Georgia by Tulsi Gabbard, I think that's all part of this picture. But, Michael, can I ask you a kind of broader question? I had an interesting conversation with Senator Chris Coons the other day, and he was saying that there have been hundreds of cases brought against the Trump administration by attorneys generals around the country, and they've won something like 75% of them. But actually, to David's point, we're not hearing about those cases because there is so much other news taking place. What is it's a kind of 30,000-foot question, but what is the parallel track of the way the justice system is working and potentially holding against the attacks upon it by this administration? How is that holding up? How is the justice system holding up?
It's funny. I was talking to one of these litigators who's been dealing with the Trump administration, defending someone against the Trump administration. And what they said was that at the district court level, amongst the judges, they have just basically lost patience and trust in the Trump administration, that they don't take them at face value. They don't believe they're acting in good faith. And because of that, the Trump administration at the district court level has run into a lot of problems. Now, the problem on the civil side for those trying to hold Trump accountable is that it moves very slowly. Those things can get appealed. They go to the appeals court level, then they ultimately go to the Supreme Court level. And if it's not the most pressing matter on the face of the earth, it can take some time. And I think the thing that I have found striking in all of this is that while the civil process, where these attorney generals bring cases and such, has moved, and it has moved against the Trump administration, it has moved, not certainly at the pace that many have wanted it to. The criminal justice system, in response to the Trump administration, has moved far more swiftly. And again, we have never seen the criminal justice system tested in the way that it's been. But the Comey and James indictments were tossed out. You've seen these grand juries acting in the way that they have. And it appears like, and the legal beagles probably could have told us this before, but certainly we haven't experienced it like this. The criminal justice system moves in a swifter way because of the enormous protections that a defendant receives in this country. And there's a speed and a clearness and a clear-cutness to that has been different than what we've seen on the civil side.
All right, the New York Times' Michael Schmidt, thank you so much for coming in this morning with your reporting. And coming up on Morning Joe, after President Trump called to nationalize